Hi, Novi Parent Camp. Good to see you guys. My name is Matt Swartz. I'm a local boy. I grew up at Northville, so I had lots of enemies at Novi. I'm kidding. I have plenty of friends at Novi, and I've been in private practice in the area working with stress and anxiety and trauma for the past 10 years. I'm super passionate about helping our community to deal with mental health, helping with students. Right now, I'm part of a really cool project in Western Wayne County where we're doing mental health student leadership, and we're basically bringing 3 high schoolers from each of 19 high schools in Western Wayne County together every month to coordinate around mental health initiatives in their schools. So I'm super passionate about all of this. I am an anxious person. I used to have panic attacks, so this is why I do anxiety work as my bread and butter, and I'm hoping you guys can benefit from it today. I've done some really cool things. I present to Fortune 500 companies and small businesses, and I work a lot with schools, and I also used to be a prison therapist, so you guys are easy to manage, trust me. Cool, so thanks so much for being here. Really great to see you guys today. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through my special system for anxiety. Again, this is not something you can necessarily master in 50 minutes, but it is something I can introduce you to. And then if you decide to go down the rabbit hole with me, I would love that. I'm actually working on getting this up online as an online course pretty soon, so it'll be accessible to many more people. So how do we go from anxious to thriving? And I want you guys to think of this on 2 levels, okay? There may be some of you in the room that deal with anxiety yourselves. You may be thinking about that. There may be some of you in the room who have anxious children. You're definitely thinking about that. But I want you to think about both, right? How does my anxiety affect my kids, and how does theirs affect me? And it becomes a feedback loop. And if you have an anxious kid and you've somehow managed to not become anxious, I would love to talk to you because I have not met a person that really works for. So anxiety, think of it both in me, but also in them, okay? 5-step process. We're gonna become more aware by recognizing what anxiety is and what it looks like. We're gonna simplify to reduce our anxiety. We're going to accept difficult emotions so that we can release tension from our brain and our body. We're going to fulfill our needs so that we can refuel our gas tank. And we're gonna evolve our minds so that we can rewire from anxious to thriving. And I'm gonna take you guys on a journey through a little bit of each of those steps. So let's start with awareness. I'm going to recognize anxiety and the symptoms. So when I'm talking about anxiety, the first question is, what is anxiety? How do I notice it? How do I know what it looks like? I'm going to suggest anxiety has 4 key categories of symptoms, okay? What I'm looking at is physical, cognitive, emotional, behavioral. So let's start up here. Things our body feels when we're anxious, okay? There are a lot of different options, and everybody's different. I do audience involvement. If you don't want to participate, you don't have to. But the question would be, who in here has any physical symptoms of anxiety, do they think? Yeah, and then there's the people who aren't raising their hands, right? So things our body feels. So I'm going to read this like a prescription medication commercial. Different physical signs of anxiety may include headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, muscle tension, shortness of breath, nausea, increased or irregular heart rate, shakes, tingling in the extremities, feeling lightheaded, restlessness, issues sleeping. The hard part is that pretty much any physical symptom could be a sign of anxiety. And the reason that is because if my nervous system is feeling like it's in danger, it can represent itself through the lens of physical issues I already have. For instance, if I'm somebody who has aches in my joints when it gets cold, I might also get aches in my joints when I get anxious. If I'm somebody who gets headaches, right, when I get stressed, I may have those headaches. I'm a tummy guy. I always feel it in my tummy. I know I'm anxious when my tummy starts to gurgle a little. That is the clinical term, tummy. Thank you. Great, physical. So then is cognitive, things that we think. Right? We're all thinking a lot. How do we know if it's an anxiety thought? They often are repeated, negative, and intrusive, right? So these thoughts come up again and again. They're negative in nature, and it seems like they're coming at us and we can't really stop them, right? So if I wake up in the morning and my brain starts going and I'm in the shower thinking about or it's time for bed and my brain can't shut off, right? Those tend to be anxiety thoughts, right? Oh no, what's going on with my kid? Let me check on the, Life 360, right? Those tend to be anxiety thoughts, right? Right now, what's going on politically? Let me check, right? Anxiety. So cognitives, things we think. Behavioral, things we do, right? How do we know something we're doing is rooted in anxiety? They tend to be sorted into three main categories. They tend to either be avoidance behaviors, I'm avoiding stressful or difficult things. Control-based behaviors, I'm trying to control things that maybe I can't really or shouldn't really be controlling. And then people-pleasing, trying to make everybody around me happy. One of the students that often slip through the cracks on anxiety are the high-achieving, quiet, compliant students, and these often tend to be females. And we go, oh, they're doing fine, because everybody around them is happy, right? Well, actually, maybe not, right? Maybe that's their strategy for surviving their fear of anybody being angry or disappointed at them, right? So it's the quiet ones sometimes you got to watch out for. So we got the behaviors, and then we have the emotions, things we feel. There are a lot of different emotions, but the main emotions that we're going to see with anxiety are going to be fear, sadness, anger, and guilt. And they'll tend to be particular patterns. You may have a more anger-based child, or you may have a more guilt-based child, or you may be more sadness-oriented, right? We all have favorite negative emotions and negative emotions that we're less skilled in. Making sense so far? Right? Can't do anything about it if we don't know what's happening. Here's the bad news. So again, this has to start with us. The more we can notice anxiety symptoms in ourselves, the more we'll be able to notice them in our children. A lot of the time what's happening is until they reach a certain threshold, an intensity level, we don't notice them in our children. And the reality is by the time it's an 8 out of 10, we're not going to be as helpful as we could be if it was at a 4 out of 10. Does that make sense? So the better we can start to notice when our anxiety is building, the better we can start to notice when our kids' anxiety is building, and the more easily we can intervene. Make sense? Seem fair? Great, cool. Okay, so let's talk about how stress and anxiety accumulate over time. How did my kid go from everything was okay to now, 5 years later, they're anxious, okay? So it's something I call the stress and anxiety, feedback loop. Okay, so it starts, and you can think of this in a moment, but also over time adding up. Okay, so in a moment, there is a cue or trigger. Something provokes the anxiety. And what I say here is it can be internal or external. What does that mean? External is a thing going on, right? So there's a thing going on, there's a test, or somebody's getting bullied, or I missed the bus, or, who knows, right? Something's going on externally, right? But internally, I might have a thought or an emotion or a physical sensation going on that you don't see that is now triggering my anxiety. And now I'm on a roll. Does that make sense? Right? Inside and outside. That cue or trigger is going to lead to a state of mind, which is a thought or emotional pattern. Again, if I go deeper on this stuff, there are these consistent states of mind that you'll find your child likely occupies one or two of these predominantly, or you might occupy one or two of these predominantly, right? But it's some kind of negative thought, some kind of negative emotion. I'm angry, I'm guilty, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. And they tend to repeat over time. They tend to be habitual. Okay. So there's that state of mind, which is usually negative, right? Then come usually the physical symptoms, right? Which, again, we went through some kind of physical distress or pain. That then will often trigger a behavior. So here's where it gets interesting. The behaviors can really be sorted into two categories, okay? Is this an avoidance behavior meant to help stop the anxiety, or is this a coping behavior that helps me engage healthfully in the anxiety, okay? So I'm going to get back to this, but no matter what, step number 5 is going to surprise you. No matter what, the anxiety decreases, right? Sooner or later. And I've been through difficult periods in my life. I went through a time where I was having panic attacks a couple times a week. I couldn't make it to work. I started throwing up on the bus. I was laying in my shower, panic attacky, right? Sooner or later, it stopped. And the question is, what did I learn? Did I learn to successfully cope and decrease the trigger, or did I learn to avoid it, which then only increases it for next time? right? So the hard part is a lot of us as parents are trying to get our kids to not be anxious. And so we're having them ultimately avoid or control the anxiety response instead of helping them to engage with it emotionally, to work through it in our brain and our body, and then release it and diminish it for the future. Think of stored up anxiety like an iceberg. You can see a certain part above the water, but then there's a giant part beneath the water. And our goal is to melt that iceberg by warming the water. And we're going to warm it with certain coping skills and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, loving attention. If there's only one thing that I can stress, it's that loving attention is what heals anxiety. And this is true for ourselves. Any fancy coping skill you're using, a breathing exercise, taking a bath, going on a walk, the real point of it is giving loving attention to the emotions that are occurring in your body. And then when we can learn to do that for ourselves, here's the good news, guys. No matter, I'm going to tell you what I believe. What I believe is humans are millions of years old. And the good news is that for millions of years, humans have been successfully coping with anxiety and emotions. What changed was that about 100 years ago, we started getting distracted by more and more and more and more stuff. It's the radio, and then it's TV, and now it's internet, right? And it's interrupting our natural biological ability to process through anxiety and stress. So the goal is, yes, I can give you a fancy toolbox of coping skills. I've been doing that for years. But the reality is, our goal is to get the distractions out of the way so that we can feel the emotion that's underneath the anxiety and allow our brain and body to do what they were naturally programmed to do, even if we're predisposed to anxiety, to process through that underlying anxiety. Does that make sense? Okay, so what we don't want to do is we don't want to do avoidance behaviors for ourselves, and we don't want to teach our children avoidance behaviors. We want to teach them if the anxiety's coming up, our job is to engage with it. What's the problem? Well, you got to go to school, and you got to do your homework, and we got to go here, and we got to go there. And all of those things are getting in the way of learning the skills that we need to learn, right? Sooner or later, you're going to have to learn those skills, either when you're 8 or 16 or 50. I would prefer we be a little late for school and learn those skills now, a little late for work and learn those skills now, than keep kicking that can down the road. Because it's those little moments where we think we need to be over there, but actually we need to be right here, that set up the game-changing experience of healing anxiety. Does that make sense? I appreciate that. Okay, so in order to do this, one of the key skill sets is something called mindfulness. Who here has already heard about mindfulness? Okay, you guys, you're experts. Okay, but I'm going to make this super simple. A lot of the time we talk about mindfulness practices like yoga or meditation, but first and foremost, mindfulness is a framework for understanding how our brain works. Okay? The idea is there's 3 parts of being a human, just 3 parts. And you're either doing one or all of these things at the same time, or 2, I suppose 1, 2, or all, okay? It starts with perception. I'm taking in sensory information about the outside world, right? Smelling, tasting, touching, all of hearing, all of those things. I know I missed one, it doesn't matter. But I'm taking in the data, okay? That's the first thing I do. Then I'm interpreting that data. I'm passing that information through some kind of window, some kind of lens that's causing me to filter, okay? So I walk down the street and there's a black dog, okay? 2 parallel realities. One parallel reality, I was bit by a dog when I was a kid. The other one, I had a beautiful black dog when I was a kid, right? Same dog. One version of me comes up and starts petting and loving that dog. The other version of me goes to the other side of the road, right? Why? My interpretation. Did the dog change? Dog didn't change. What changed was my past experience and the way I was interpreting it, right? So for some of us, one thing appears dangerous, and to someone else, you're going to say no big deal at all, right? And so that's what sets us up to begin interpreting things as negative. For kids experiencing anxiety, we think, most of the time what you'll hear is, I don't like this thing going on, I don't like that thing going on, and it's making me anxious. But what's actually making them anxious is their interpretation of the emotion that's arising in that experience. I'm scared, I'm guilty, I'm angry, and then I'm fighting against that emotion, And so that begins to perpetuate the anxiety growing and growing and growing. Does this make relative sense? Okay, so then comes the response. After we've interpreted, then we act. It might be a thought, it might be a behavior, it might be an emotion, right? Most of the time we're trying to intervene on this level, but by then it's often too late, right? What we want to do is we either want to intervene on this level, begin to change our interpretations, or intervene on this level, change what we're taking in the first place. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today. Any questions about this? Great. Okay, this is real quick. In my longer trainings, I get into this way more deeply. I can categorize all of your children's or yours anxiety responses into 6 categories. And that's it, okay? They're either trying to solve a problem because they feel responsible. They're avoiding an issue because they feel distrust. They're shut down because they feel overwhelmed. They're pleasing because they feel alone. They're aggressive, angry ones, because they feel powerless, or they're confused because they feel stuck. And each of these needs to be dealt with a little differently. And again, this is like the secret sauce stuff that I can't super get into today. But identify for you, is there one of those that's sticking out? Probably for a lot of you, I find in Northville, Novi, Plymouth, we got a lot of solvers going on, right? We're going to solve these problems. We're going to keep controlling. We're going to keep fixing, right? I also run into a lot of pleasers. Whatever I have to do to make you happy, I'm going to make it happen. And then our kids learn these skills, but then they take it, they 10x it, right? And now we've got a ton of anxiety, right? So I'm not saying none of these things are helpful in a moment. The problem is when they accumulate over time into bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger reactions. Does this make sense? Great. Okay, so again, in an ideal world, I would go more deeply into that, but we can't. Okay, so part 2, we're going to talk about simplifying, right? How do we have less anxiety? We're going to reduce the stuff coming in. At the end of the day, the first place to start after awareness is, I got to reduce the stuff that's coming in, okay? You guys as parents, over the last 30 years, the amount of information you're taking in has grown exponentially. Who remembers when somebody in their lives got their first car phone? Yeah, right. I remember when my dad got the car phone, things started changing pretty quickly, right? Ever since then, things have gotten really complex and complicated. I remember I had my little Microsoft DOS. I had Oregon Trail as a kid, right? And number crunchers, right? That's great. That's fine. No big deal. But it's gotten bigger. It's bigger. It's bigger. It's bigger, right? Television used to have an hour or 2 of news at night. And now we got 24-hour news cycles on 5 different stations, right? So all of this information is too much for your biology to process. And the reality is until you stop taking in so much information, you will not be able to reduce your anxiety. And the same is true for your kids. You are responsible for the environment that you curate in your house. If your children have access to unending stimuli, because every time they get bored, they get upset, you put an iPad in front of them, they will develop anxiety. One of the most important skills is the ability to tolerate silence and boredom. I'm going to sound like a crazy person, okay? Every day, I have 2 young children. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. Every day after they get home from school, or if they're not in school, depending on the day, 2 p.m. until 5 p.m., they are in their rooms alone doing quiet activities. I believe this to be one of the most important things I do in my house. I teach them it's okay to be alone. I teach them it's okay to have a quieter rhythm. I teach them that they can occupy themselves. I promise I'm not torturing them. They come out of the room, they want a hug, I subtly tut them back in, right? The 6-year-old is way better than the 3-year-old. I'm not ignoring them. I play games with them. I take them outside. I love them. I care about them. But I have to teach them how to have that silent time. I can't get them to meditate. They're 3 years old. They're 6 years old. They're not going to sit still and do nothing. But I can teach them how to downgrade their stimuli. Does this make sense? For some of you with younger kids, don't do 3 hours. Oh, that's crazy, right? You haven't built that up, right? For some of you with younger kids, it's going to be easier. right? They don't know any better yet. You can start clearing some quiet space. At the beginning, it may need to be quiet space together. What does that mean? Throw your phone away, turn out the TV. We're gonna do quiet space together. Small games and crafts that are quiet, right? And then over time, you can maybe start advancing them to spending some time on their own. Older kids, oh my God, Matt, it's too late. What do? We have non-electronic time, right? But guys, you can't have them do that and you not do that, right? So non-electronic time means everybody puts their phone in the cupboard. Everybody puts their phone in the lockbox, right? It's not fair for you to be on the phone and they have to be quiet, okay? So this is where it starts with us, right? And if we admit it, right, maybe we're not as bad as they are, but we're probably not super good about it, right? And it's just too much, you guys. It's just too much. Our bodies weren't made for this. Okay, so I'm gonna bowl through this. Okay, so how does anxiety build up over time, right? That's a really important question to understand. So when I'm saying simplify, it sounds easy, but the fact is that we've gained momentum, so we're gonna have to decrease momentum, okay? So I wanna explain this. Is anxiety nature or nurture? Yes, right? It's both, okay? So nature and nurture starts with genetics, okay? You all have cups. I have cups. Some of us have smaller cups. Some of us have larger cups. Some of us have more resilience and capacity in our nervous system. Some of us have less. I happen to be born with a smaller cup, which is why I had to learn how to deal with anxiety and learn how to deal with this work, okay? So genetics define my capacity for emotional processing. Then comes my early childhood experiences. The first 5 to 7 years are the most impactful time in your children's life. You are downloading 7 times faster in those first 5 years, which means relatively, if you take the amount of information a child is downloading in the first 5 years of their life, they don't double it until they're 35, right? The first 5 years is equal to the next 30. The next 35, I did that wrong. Until they're 40, 35 years, because they're learning 7 times faster, okay? So those early childhood experiences are incredibly impactful, right? The most important things we can do in these stages is to be a soothing caregiver, okay? Not enabling, I'm not gonna prevent them from experiencing pain, but I'm gonna teach them how to regulate, right? And so I have to learn how to regulate so I can teach them. Again, giant rabbit hole. Next come traumas, really difficult life experiences. So picture your cup, your early childhood, the difficult things you face, we call these adverse childhood experiences. Think of it like putting rocks in the cup, okay? The traumas, think about like putting little pebbles in the cup, okay? Then traumas are difficult experiences. So maybe a family member dies and maybe we move, or maybe we lose a friend, right? There could be lots of difficult, maybe a teacher yells at us, right? Could be lots of difficult experiences. Trauma is defined by our ability to process it. In other words, what is traumatic for a 5-year-old is not usually traumatic for a 14-year-old. It has to do with skill and capacity, right? It's not about weak, it's not about strong, it's just about skill set, right? So is it easier to traumatize a child? Yes, it is. Now, do they have more time to bounce back? Maybe, right? So I don't want to be doom and gloom about it. Children are very resilient and can heal, but also those early negative experiences impact them. Next comes repeated events, right? So it's no big deal if one day I walk into the classroom and my teacher yells at me. Life goes on. But if I walk into a classroom and every day my teacher is yelling at me, or every week, that starts to take a really heavy emotional toll on the nervous system, right? And so think of putting those repeated events into that cup like sand. Okay, so now my cup is starting to fill up, and I take my daily stress, which think of that as water, and I pour it in. Depending on how big that cup is and how full it is of junk, determines how much space there is for the water and whether the water will be okay or whether it will overflow. The next part I'm going to get into is how do we take water out of the cup? Maybe even how do we take sand out of the cup, right? But the first part is how do we not pour as much water into the cup, right? That's the simplify step. Does that make sense? So you can't necessarily control how much room there is in the cup, but you can begin controlling how much water we're putting in, okay? So there's this thing called the window of tolerance. Who's ever heard of the window of tolerance before? just that nerd in the back and her. Great. Sorry. That's Alexander. He works with me. He's fabulous, and I love him very much. Alexander is awesome working with adolescents and depression and grief. He's fabulous. So the window of tolerance is sort of this map for how regulated or not regulated I am. So we start in that middle area, that window of tolerance where we feel regulated and safe. If I get dysregulated, my nervous system, my brain, and my body are designed to go up here first. It's called over-arousal. This is either flight or fight. I'm either going to try to fix the problem or I'm going to try to get away from it, okay? In an ideal world, the thing I try works, and then I re-regulate, right? I fix the problem, now it's gone, I feel better, okay? In an ideal world, I go up, I run away from the problem, it's fixed, I feel better, okay? But here's what happens. Oftentimes, the problem really isn't easily fixable, and then I end up ping-ponging back and forth between fight and flight, trying to figure it out. Do I try to get away from it? Do I try to fix it? There's an issue on social media with my friends, and there's nothing I can do. Oh my God, what should I say? I can't say anything. I'm going to put it down. Oh my God, I can't. I got to pick it up again, right? So this is anxiety. I get caught in this ping-pong fight or flight. Hopefully, sooner or later, we cope and we move back down into the window of tolerance. For kids who don't learn how to cope with their anxiety, watch this. This is one of my favorites. They start ping-ponging up here. Eventually, they kick down around the outside, and they end up down here in under-arousal, which is the shutdown or the freeze response. This is depression. Depression begins accumulating over time when the invisible anxiety you didn't understand was taking a toll on your child has built up to a point where they can no longer handle it. And then the shutdown response comes in to numb it out, right? Alexander loves working with depression, not so much my cup of tea. He's helpful getting people out once they've shut down. For me, I like to work up here and prevent them from getting down there in the first place. Depression and anxiety are not separate things. Again, I know this is a bit deeper tracks. But we think of these as very separate things, but they're very intertwined. They're different responses our body is doing to try to keep us safe and regulated. And sometimes when they overcorrect, they end up becoming a big problem. But they're trying to help. So, and again, whole rabbit hole. So the goal is we want to build this window of tolerance, okay? We want to get better at moving out of the dysfunction, and then we want to grow that window over time. The more difficult stuff in our life, the more that window shrinks and the easier it is to get outside that window of tolerance. So my goal is to help my clients build that window. Does that make relative sense? Perfect. How are we doing on time? We're okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so simplify. Does this make sense? Take in less water? Okay, so next we're going to talk about accepting. Okay. Okay, so here's the challenge. I'm going to make this simple. I'm short on time, so I'm just trying to make this simple, okay? The issue is that our nervous system, our brains and our bodies are storing a ton of old data. We're doing this so that we can prevent pain that we experienced in the past from reoccurring in the future. The problem is, what happens if you have a filing cabinet and you just keep shoving stuff inside the filing cabinet and never taking anything out? It gets stacked up. There's no more room. Things start exploding, right? So this is our nervous system. Most of us, especially adults, we've put way too much inside the filing cabinet, and we need to learn to get stuff out. For kids, some kids who are super anxious, they've got too much stuff in the filing cabinet. But in general, we want to teach them maybe not to put so much in the first place because we don't want it to be too jam-packed. So again, there's a lot of nuance to this, but the general idea is if I want to get some of that sand and some of those pebbles out of my cup, I need to learn to feel and release my emotions. So I said the core emotions are going to be anger, sadness, fear, and guilt. There are absolutely other emotions. There's confusion, and there's disgust, and there's all of these things, but I try to keep it simple first and foremost. Our goal is to learn and develop skills to feel these emotions so we can produce what's called catharsis. Who in here knows the word catharsis? It's an emotional release. Have you ever watched a sad movie and cried and then felt better afterwards? Right? Have you ever gone on a run and then felt better afterwards? Right? Have you ever had a difficult discussion with somebody you thought was going to go bad and actually went really well and you felt better afterwards? That's catharsis, that's release. Maybe some of you go to spiritual contexts for that. Maybe you do creative things to do that, right? It's a feeling of lightness. It's a feeling of openness. It's a feeling of release. And we want to learn how to produce this in our body as often as possible. Believe it or not, some people would be up here presenting feeling anxious. Actually, for me, this is like what helps me release. So like right now, I feel super open. And after this, I'm going to feel like, I'm going to feel really good. So everybody's a little different. I'm the weirdo. I get that. But what we want to do is we want to find to start the areas in your life that can produce emotional catharsis already. Think about the things that allow you to release. And again, if it's music, great. If it's being creative, great. If it's going on a walk in the park, great. If it's talking to a friend, great. There's a million things in that toolbox. We want to identify that process and begin to use it intentionally rather than accidentally. And then we want to be able to teach our kids how to do that, right? Again, for kids, if you just allow the process to unfold, it will happen most of the time naturally. But early in their lives, younger kids, pre-K and before, you have to do it with them. And then as they get older, you do it a little less, a little less, a little less, and then they start to do it themselves. For those of you who have super anxious teens, you may need to double back and start helping them to learn how to do that emotional release. Again, instead of control that thing, get the homework done, do this, blah, 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 do that, talk to them, tell them that thing. All of that is just rearranging the furniture. It's not actually changing the room. We want to learn that. If we do feel, we're going to produce two things. Number one is there's going to be a waste product. Emotional catharsis is like digestion for your emotion system. So you eat an apple, you get two things. You get the waste product, you poop it out, and then you get the potential energy, right? So this is the secret sauce. Underneath the anxiety is actually energetic potential. It's your child and your urge to create in the world around you, but it's been suppressed and repressed by our culture, by our school systems, no, I don't mean all school systems, that's not, but the way we're taught, right? You guys sitting in 4th grade, sitting in 7th grade, sit down, shut up, do your homework, right? You're not allowed to feel, you're not allowed to process. Schools are getting better at that. We're doing social emotional learning. We're understanding it's more complex than that, right? But most of you guys, generationally, you didn't get that, right? So we pack it all in. So if we can begin learning how to cathart, we can recapture the energy that is dormant in our nervous systems and use it to create positive change in our world, which means connection with your children. It means, positive outcomes at work and at home. It means new adventures. It means helping to heal your body. It means all kinds of amazing things. So I want you to hear this. Most people are running at about 20 or 30% of their capacity, because they're suppressing their ability to naturally go through this process. And if we can relearn skills instead of just getting stuff done and getting to the goal and worrying about what's happening next year, we can learn how to feel and work through these emotions. We can recapture tons of energy. We can clear out the restrictions inside our nervous system, and our lives can completely change. And again, I'm not saying this intellectually, I'm saying this from personal experience, because my school system, Northville, my parents taught me to hold it and hold it and hold it in. And then as I grew up and I had to deal with those panic attacks and learn how to work through anxiety, I learned how to not only discharge it, but recapture that energy to begin making the impact on the world that I wanted to make. And I'm very lucky these days, I get to make tons of impact. So thank you guys for being here. So I'm gonna go through really quick, because I know we gotta go. When the next step is to fulfill our needs, okay? This is a complex process that I'm going to go through very briefly. Who here has ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy before? Oh, great. Yeah, half the room. So we have these sets of needs, right? Some of them are super basic, your physiological needs. You need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to breathe, right? You need to exercise. Some of them are a little more complex, physical safety, but also emotional safety that we establish through structure and routine and expectation. Connection, relationship, right? Your child's capacity for relationship will be dominated by your capacity for a relationship. Esteem, who am I in the world? What's unique and special about me? The more you know how to answer that question for you, the more you can help your children answer that question. And then actualization, all that fancy stuff, being the best version of yourself and yada, 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 which is wonderful and really important, but you're not necessarily here to hear about that. But until we meet those needs, we can't do that. we can't become the best version of ourselves. So I walk people through processes of learning how to meet these needs and enacting processes in their house with their children in order to do these things. I don't work with kids directly. I work with parents so that we can make the changes we need to make and establish the changes in our house. I also work with my wife. She's a therapist. She works with the kids. She's fabulous. She also does couples work. She's amazing. But you guys have to think of it. If you really want your kids' anxiety to change, the answer is not just send them to therapy once a week. That's not going to do it. It's going to be about the changes that you're able to make in your home that help them to learn these skills and create a safe space. Okay, so finally, evolve. I'm going to give you guys the 6 most well-researched techniques that you can use to improve your house and improve anxiety long-term, okay? The first is gratitude. Setting up some kind of gratitude practice every day, whether this is something you do in the car on the way to school or at breakfast or at night before you go to bed. We do it at night before we go to bed. Each of my 3-year-old and 6-year-old, believe it or not, my 3-year-old knows what gratitude is. And we are having conversations every night. What are you grateful for? Sometimes it's silly. He says whales. Other times it's very earnest. And it's, I'm thankful for mommy doing X, Y, and Z. I'm thankful I got to go to Kids Empire today, okay? Next, I mentioned before, is the stillness practice. Start small, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, right? You need a stillness practice, and then invite your children into that stillness practice. What does that mean? No phone, no TV, no computer, right? Still. We can go for a walk. I will count a walk, by the way. That does count, right? I'm not just saying freeze on your couch, right? Slow, still, small, right? We can get to real meditation later. We got to start somewhere, okay? Next, I'm sorry?
Reading?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Anything that's like, on the energy scale, something that's like a 1 or 2 or a 3, I will count as a stillness practice, especially in the beginning.
That will be kind of in your
But it's better than all of that, and it's better than YouTube. So it's stages, right? I'm not an extremist. I'm a process guy. We want to keep taking little steps.
Coloring or doing a puzzle.
Totally. Puzzle. Coloring, small, Connect 4, I don't know, right? Simple, low energy activities. Think about what you enjoy. Bring them into it, right? Next is a movement practice. Some kind, again, go for a walk, go for a run, play in the backyard, but you have to move with them. Yoga is fine, anything that gets you guys moving. Next, a kindness practice. Your kid's job is to identify one kind thing they can do for somebody each day and then report back to you about that. And it's your job to do the same thing. What did you do kind today? Today, I did this kind thing. What did you do kind today? Right? And we have that conversation every day. Next is belonging. The most important thing you can do to help your children foster relationships is foster meaningful relationships for yourself. I understand it's easier said than done, but we all need a village, we all need a community, and I would encourage people desperately to find that if you don't have it. If you do, make use of it, teach your children how to connect. I had to learn it all myself. My parents are weirdos, and we did not have family friends growing up. All of my friends came through school. So I then in college and afterwards had to learn. I'm doing it now. I'm teaching myself how to build family friends. My parents didn't teach me that. So I have, for a very long time, had to deal with feelings of not belonging until I figured it out, right? So belonging is really important. Then finally, creation, some kind of creative activity. Coloring, writing a poem, listening to music together, any kind of creative, generative activity. These are the most well-researched, most dynamic, most impactful things you can do. So this is always a good place to start. We gotta go. I appreciate you guys being here. If I could talk another hour, I would. Thank you. Thank you.